Hello, everyone from all over the world. Always great to be back on this platform and sharing with you exciting new things that we're doing. So what are DNA labels? I think that's the right way to start this. So DNA labels is a new tool that lets you organize your DNA matches using custom color-coded labels, which can help you gain more insights about your DNA matches and potentially break through some genealogical brick walls. So on MyHeritage, we're trying all the time to think of different tools and new options, which will make your lives easier when working with your DNA matches. And we think that labels are the right way to do that. These are like kind of groups that you can take your DNA matches and label them or tag them in a way that will make it easier for you to keep track of your research. And we'll show some examples along the way. But what are labels? What should you do with them? And how can they be broken down into? So there are different ways of how to use labels. Some use some of those that here are on the list, and some use all of them. Some have other ideas that I didn't mention here, because really the possibilities or the number of options of how to use labels is really up to you to decide. But the way most people use them is by creating labels by certain ancestor names or by family lines, surnames that they're researching, breaking DNA matches into paternal and maternal. Some use them to mark DNA matches based on the position on the genome where they have shared segments with those DNA matches. But really, as you'll see throughout the presentation, you can use them in any way that you'd like. So let's start with what labels are, how they look, what have we done on the website. And in addition to labels, we've made a couple of changes, so I'll go over these. First, we changed the user interface a bit, or the layout of how a DNA match card looks like. So this is a match with my father. This is how it used to look like up until we released DNA labels. You can see that the option to add a note was right here on the upper right corner. And we made a slight change. And what happened now, you might not notice it, but we added this left vertical panel here on the left side with a checkbox, a star icon, and the note moved to here. And it's not very dramatic, I think, for most of our users. Well, maybe you missed the note. Where did the note icon went? But it went just right here to the left. And I'll explain soon once we start looking at labels into why we did that. And it's basically to make more room for you to work with your DNA labels and to manage all of the things you want to do with your DNA matches on the left side. Labels is a big feature and a big tool that gives you, as I said, lots of flexibility into customizing your labels, giving them names and choosing colors. But one of the things that we decided to add as well is the option to mark a match as a favorite. So that's the icon right here. And you can just click on that and the match will be marked as a favorite, and you can do that for all of the DNA matches that you have. We added filtering options. I'll talk about them a bit later on, but you'll be able also later to filter your DNA matches to show only the ones which you marked as favorites. Favorite can be used in any way that you want. Some people use it to indicate a match that you found interesting and you want to mark it for yourself to look at it later. Some mark their close family members as favorites just because they like it. All options are good. We support each one of these. So favorites is one of the options, one of the new options we added as part of the release of DNA labels. All right. So now let's look at the DNA matches page. And I'm looking here at the results of my grandma. Again, I'm going to use examples only from my own close family members from whom they granted me with permission to show their photos and names to keep the privacy of my other DNA matches intact. So as you can see, the page slightly changed, and we can see that left panel that I spoke about right here on the left. And I think that we're pretty much ready to start creating labels and tagging DNA matches with the labels that we're creating. So the way to do that is to hit the checkbox that we added for each one of the DNA matches. So in this case, I'm going to choose my dad. And once I tick that button, a panel will be opened here on the right. This is the DNA labels management panel, we call it internally. There's a short explanation about what labels are with the option to create new labels. When you'll have labels, you'll see them right here. We'll see that soon. And I want to create a new label for my dad. So I'm hit the create new label option. And a pop-up will show, giving me the option to give that label a name. You can choose any name goes, any character you want to use is fine. We just put a limit of 100 characters so that just it's not too long. Looking at the examples of what people are creating, it's way more than enough. And then you can choose a color. The color will be tagged to the DNA match, and you'll be able to see that in various places on the website. So choose a color that you like and that makes sense to the type of label that you're creating. So I think that in this case, I just decided to call this label paternal matches, and I chose this nice blue hue color, and I hit save. And what you can see now is that a new label was created, the paternal matches, and I'm about to label Rafael Snir, my dad, as a paternal match. And I can hit apply. And that's it. Now I have a new label created called paternal matches. Labeled, I chose the color, the blue color, the light blue color, and you can see an indication right here next to my dad in the left panel that we added that this DNA match is labeled. Colors are great, but sometimes people don't remember what they actually indicate. So if you hover with your mouse over that colored dot, you'll be able to see the name that you've given to that label. All right, I think we're ready to create a new label now. And I'm going to choose myself this time. And you can see that I'm about to label Ran Snir as, and I have the option to label him as a paternal match, the group that I already created, or create a new label. But what I can do, and an option that we added here, is the option to label multiple DNA matches in one click to a certain label or to more than one label. So in this case right here, I chose myself and I chose my brother Shai. We're both selected. And the text here indicates that I'm about to label 2 DNA matches as. Now I don't want to label them as paternal matches. I want to create a new label. So I'm going to choose that. And I decided to create a new label called grandsons and chose the orange color in this case. And here it's added to the list. And I can hit apply. And now you can see that both myself and my brother are tagged with the orange label, which I called grandsons. What else can you do with labels after you've created them? So in some of the cases, we give our labels names, and then later on we want to refine them, or we want to change the color. So there's the option to edit them. And once you hit the edit, you will see again this pop-up that you've seen before, which will give you the options to change the name or to change the color. That will affect all of the DNA matches associated, obviously. So the tags will not be removed. But the name will obviously will be reflected in all of them, and the color indication will change accordingly. So I can choose to call this now my favorite grandsons and change it to the purple color, and then you'll see that the change affected. You'll see the color, the dotted color here for myself and for my brother will be purple with the new name. If you decided that you want to delete a label because you no longer need it, you can hit the delete button, or you want to start fresh. That's another reason why people delete their labels. So you can click on the delete icon and you will get kind of like a warning pop-up telling you that if you delete this label, all of the DNA matches associated with it, the association will be removed as the label will no longer exist. So another change we did is to change the user interface of how the filters look like. What you see now is a screen capture taken from about 3 months ago, before we had labels. And in order to make room, because we have so many different filtering options today on MyHeritage, which is great and gives much more flexibility again for you, we changed it slightly. And now you will see them as each one of them stands alone with a nice icon. So all of the options we had before are still here. You still have the options to filter by the tree details, the relationships, the location, ethnicities, and genetic groups, but we've also added a new option to filter by the labeling association. So if I'm looking again at the list of DNA matches and I hit the labels option, it will open up and give me the option to filter by the favorites. You remember that nice star we had before, or by the different labels that I created. So for example, if I want to look only at the DNA matches who I already labeled as grandsons, I will choose that, hit apply, and the list will show me now only the ones which are labeled with that grandson's label. There's also an option to multi-select, so I want to look now at all of the DNA matches who either tagged with grandsons or paternal matches. I have the option to select both, hit apply, and I will see them. The condition here, the logic behind this filtering option, is whether they have at least one of them and not both. And up till now, we spoke mostly or pretty much only about how to use labels on the DNA matches page, creating labels, associating DNA matches to labels, and then filtering the list to look at the ones you already tagged. But a lot of the goodies are found in the review DNA match page. And that's actually one of the places where you can make the most value of the new DNA labels addition. So when you'll go to your review DNA match page, here again, I'm looking at the kit I managed for my grandma, and I'm looking at her DNA match with my dad. And we also added the option to label and create labels from the review DNA match page that can be found here in the top right corner. You'll find the favorite icon as usual. And then this icon right here, the tag icon or the label icon, it's slightly different than the checkbox we had in the previous page, because in the DNA matches page, you have the option to select multiple DNA matches. And in this case, we're talking about just one. I just want to label Rafael, my dad, the DNA match I'm looking at. But I think the best part of DNA labels and the smartest way to use them is using the shared DNA matches component. And when I'm looking at the shared DNA matches, I can see myself because I match my grandmother and I match my father. I can see my brother, which is the same case, and I can see my daughter right here, who also matching both my dad and my grandma. And what we've changed here, unlike what it was before, is again, we gave more room for the favorites and the labels. So if the DNA match, the shared DNA match, is already tagged with a label, you'll see that indication right here. So because in the DNA matches page before, we already created two labels and we've associated myself and my brother to those labels, you'll see an indication right here that we're already associated with these labels. On the top right corner, as I mentioned before, you'll see the indications, and here you'll see the information about the shared DNA matches. And if you'll tick the check boxes that we've added next to each one of the shared DNA matches, the panel will open up, and what you're doing now is actually labeling your shared DNA matches. Remember, these are people who also appear in your DNA matches list, right? So when I'm looking at my dad, and for example, I want to decide now that I want to tag these DNA matches as paternal matches, I now have the option. I'll just say to conclude that it's been very fun, to be honest, for me and for my amazing, talented team of developers and designers and quality assurance engineers working on this feature. It's very colorful, so we enjoyed working on the colors. Just choosing those 30 colors was, well, some will say challenging, some will say fun. But since we launched it, we're following those who are using it, and we see that it's making life easier for so many of our users, and we're happy to see that you're using it in such a way. We have more plans of doing more things like that in the future and expanding labels to more areas in the DNA domain. And with that, I will conclude.